classes, how to write the perfect book proposal, how to find the perfect agent, how to make money writing children's literature. And it was a terrible mistake for me. And on the day before, that was my last day, someone said, "How's it going, Jan?" And I said, "It's terrible. I have a terrible headache, and I think I've been going to all the wrong classes." And so they told me the secret of being at that conference, one of the many secrets, but it's a good one, that we're there more, some of us, for our soul than for our brain. And they said, go to this class and that class, and it'll be very different. So I did. And as a result, all heaven broke loose for me. So I fell in love then with writing, with other women's voices, and it became the greatest thing now. I'm in a community of real women writers that caused me to be electrified and to feel positive and to find my confidence again. I felt like I'm not alone in this. So as a result of being there, I was invited to teach there the next year. And what I discovered was so many women telling me why they weren't writing. And that's when I discovered it is a big fat problem that so many women, otherwise smart, otherwise super intelligent, extraordinarily creative, for some reason have it in their mind that they're not good enough to write, that they haven't created time. They say to me, I don't have time to write. They say to me, I don't have a space to write. My husband doesn't support me. My kids are always in my hair. And that set off all these alarms for me, which totally caused a brand new trajectory for me in my life. The problem was women are silenced. Women around the world are silenced, and women in the United States are silenced. So that became my new problem. And so, interestingly enough, I had called my class Marry Your Muse, just kind of whimsically. But we decided to have a commitment ceremony. We had an actual wedding ceremony on the last day of our class, and women wrote vows to their muses or their invisible creative collaborators, that force that you feel collaborates with you when you're in the process of creating, gives you those beautiful phrases, provides you with some of those metaphors, redirects your thinking when you're in some kind of a snip. And it was on the day of the wedding ceremony that I heard all these women reframe what was their initial obstacle. So the woman that said to me, I can't write because I don't have time to write, would say she identified her muse, she gave her muse a name, so her wedding vow would be, Dear Aphrodite, I vow to you that I will give you 30 minutes of my day, 7 days a week before breakfast. And the woman who said, I don't have a space to write, made a vow to her muse that said, I'm going to turn my guest bedroom into a playground for us. And it went on, where everyone identified what their obstacles were, and their vows became the spinning around of those obstacles. So I am going to take the first one and say how important it is in terms of the yin of our writer's life. You know, the yin and the yang, you've all seen that Buddhist symbol. The yin is the feminine, the yang is the masculine. The yin is the quiet, the interior, the yang is the exterior. So I'm asserting that none of us can succeed in the way that we see it and hope for it in our visions if we do not set aside time, not even for writing, but time for nothingness, time that you would think of as a spiritual practice. If you start only with 5 minutes, a commitment to nothingness, a commitment to time out, time away, that means total solitude for you. Nobody in your space, nobody with a right to knock on your door, in which you're receiving the broadcasts from mind at large. The information that's trying to find its way to you will only find its way to you when you tune in. Like we used to have to tune in the old days before digital, in the car radio. We have to really aggressively commit to this practice of reception. And you don't even have to be a believer in God. Emily Dickinson said it like this: the only news I get is bulletins all day from immortality. Bulletins all day from immortality. You know, she was an agoraphobic. She hardly ever left her room. She wrote thousands and thousands of poems, and they found them when she died. But her poems have rocked the world, and she set it up that she received consciously broadcasts all day long from immortality. So that's what we're talking about. Any one of you, I'm going to guess, any one of you who's written anything for any length of time knows what it feels like to get an assist from the invisible world. You know the archetype, the muse. You understand the spiritual aspect of intelligence coming through us. So the yin part of the writing life is for you to be fully committed to a practice. I call it a spiritual practice. Doesn't have anything to do with any religion, but it means you're setting yourself up, you're acknowledging that you're fully present and you're ready to receive. You're tuning in. And I started doing it for 20 minutes a day in 1990. And now I do it some days for an hour, just because it feels so good. It keeps me so grounded. And the repercussions of it are so serious that I rarely get upset about anything now. And so there's a huge benefit to this. And so when I'm talking about our success as writers, that's where I start, with you providing evidence to the world, to your family. Now, your family members have to be part of this scheme, otherwise it won't work. You have to tell your spouse, your partner, your husband, if you have one, your kids have to know. They have to take you seriously as a writer. And they will only know to do that if you take yourself seriously. You know, Carl Jung said, nothing affects the environment of a child so much as the unlived life of a parent. So you have to be fully living out loud as a writer, and your family has to know it. And they even have to know, you know, my sister moved in with me a couple years ago. I had to fully inform her. We had to sit down. I had to talk about my practice. I said, for the first hour of the day, you're not going to see me. I'm not going to talk to you. You know, I may go out and get a cup of coffee, but I'm going to be in my room with a candle burning. And I don't take phone calls and I don't chit chat. So we're all grown up now. We all set our own parameters for what that spiritual practice looks like. But it's you toning your writer's spiritual muscles so that you get used to being in relationship with the muse or the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it. But it's that one who helps us when we're in the process of writing. And if you don't have that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you just haven't written enough yet. So practice, try writing for an hour straight, and you'll get what I'm talking about. It will happen because it happens predictably. It's the same thing that happens if you're able to get yourself out of the picture. If you take your journal and you write a question in that journal and you open yourself to the possibility that you're going to receive an answer that may come from a different plane than the one you're on. It often happens because that's how close the veil, you know, thin veil. So for us to be able to practice the relationship with the invisible realms is a very important part of readying ourselves for the big work that we're up to. And beyond that, these are all tenets of what's called an artist creed. And I'll post that on the Guild. I'll send it to Marge so she can post it on the Guild page. There's 10 of them, but it starts with, I believe I'm worth the time to create whatever I feel called to create. And the second one is, I believe my work is worthy of the name sacred and worthy of its own space. And the second thing for us to prepare ourselves to be the great writers and visionaries and prophetic people that we're here to be is to have a place where that writing can occur, that you know and everyone in your family knows is your writing place. So if you don't have one now, you can't do it on the kitchen table with kids doing their homework there, right? And it doesn't call for great privilege. It doesn't mean you have to have an extra room in your house. It just means it could be you go off to the neighborhood church, or you find a place in somebody's office building. You barter for something, but you must have a place where you know you're going to write, and that's a place that feels sacred to you because no invasions are allowed. Nobody knocks on the door asking where's their socks or when's dinner. You have to step in to a higher mode of being that says, I'm taking myself seriously as a writer now. And if this is your first day of doing it, then you tell your family about it. In the same way, you have to tell your family if you go away for a weekend conference and something big happens to you. You're a changed woman. You announce to your family something really different is going on inside me. I'm more committed now. I'm going to change my ways now. And that is your sign. That's the evidence you give to the world that you're ready for the help the world has for you. So let's see, Marge, if there's any questions now that's come up with anybody on the call.
Not yet, Jan, and I've written a note in the chat room, folks, as Jan's speaking, as questions arise for you. Definitely put them in the Q&A as they arise, and they'll be ordered. So please do so. Jan, I actually have a question, which is some notion of how Olympic athletes have it seems to me that if we have a place where we write, it triggers something in the same way like ritual triggers the readiness for the writing. Can you speak to that? Why that sort of one place ritual, writing ritual as the preparation included place?
I think there's something holy and sacred about the art of writing. Because even though we're writing first and often to heal ourselves, it so happens that when we sustain that energy and cause those words to find their way into the world, those words have the same potential and power to do for other people what they did for us as they rose up and cleared our channels. You know, I have been healed, transformed, changed the whole course of my life because of Audre Lorde, because of Doris Lessing, because of Simone de Beauvoir, Kate Millett. People who struggled. Kate Millett struggled all the time with mental difficulty. And yet she created and caused books to be in the world that changed the lives of me and thousands of other women, even though she had mental illness of a kind to deal with. However she braved through that, however she got those words out there, is the same challenge that's upon us. I think of it as holy work because it's of a circle. It's a circular thing. You know, when I came back from the first writing guild and I wrote the Artist's Creed, which was all the 10 women's vows from the marriage day, my partner, Annie, said to me, "You don't think it stops there, does it? You don't think it stops there?" I go, "What do you mean, stops where?" She goes, "So you wrote the Artist's Creed, but don't you think each one of those tenets of the creed ought to be a chapter of a book? Don't you have more to say on it?" And it was true. And I started to write the book, but some days I'd be stuck. She'd go off on her job. And I would sit there, and you know those kind of days where you just keep going every 5 minutes into your thesaurus. You're just stuck. You're thinking it's about the words. It's never about the words. It's always about the story. But she'd come home and I'd say, "I have a terrible time writing. I can't find the right words." She goes, "You got to remember who you're writing for. Who are you writing for?" I said, "I'm writing for the Musettes." Well, she said, "Put that on your computer. You're writing for those 20 women that were in your first class at the Guild conference." So I put it on my computer, writing to the Musettes. And as soon as I could feel I'm drifting off and thinking about the words again, it would bring me right back to, I only need one person to be writing for. You know, I wrote a book called Born Gay because so many gay teens are committing suicide. All I have to have in my mind is myself at age 13 when I was writing suicide notes. All I have to remember is every gay kid I ever met who has the same struggles of something's wrong with me and I can't get out of my skin. So all you have to think of is who is one person that you're writing this for. Doesn't matter if it's poetry. You know, who do you think Mary Oliver has in her mind? You know, her poetry changed considerably after her partner died. She took a real spiritual turn that she had always neglected before. She always wrote nature, nature, nature. But after she loses her partner, Molly, her poetry changes. And it's not just nature, but words like spirit begin to come out. Words like holiness show up more because grief takes you deeper into the reality of human being. So that's why I think of it as holy, because it's not just the magic of healing ourselves that our words do, that they go out and heal other people. And I'm telling you, if you were to attend a writer's conference and listen to those 3-minute open readings, in 3 minutes, that healing can occur. In 3 minutes of reading, major things get released, get broken up, get torn asunder, dams break, ice flows melt. Everything can happen in just a little 3-minute segment, which some of you will experience after this call because there's an open mic reading. So that's why I say the yin part of our writing life is as important and as consequential as everything you need to know about writing the book proposal, finding an agent, you know, and people besiege writers, you know, people besiege me constantly. And one week I'll get 25 emails from people wanting me to, you know, will I take a call with them because they want to find out how to get an agent, or should they publish or self-publish? And I'm asking, what have you written? And they haven't got that far yet. So the only thing we have to do is ground ourselves, have a spiritual practice, open ourselves up consciously and intentionally to the powers that be that are all around us, make the necessary discernments about what it is we're writing, for whom, and why, and then begin the writing. That's when the magic happens. It will happen practically automatically once you're clear on why you're doing what you're doing. That's why I always say, don't worry so much about writer's block. If you're really tuned into why you're doing what you're doing, you won't be blocked because you will sense the urgency of your poem or your chapter or your fiction story. There's an urgency, even if you're writing a comical graphic novel. You know, there's people that learn from those. Your wisdom is contained in those cartoon things, right? Your wisdom is contained in every word that comes out of your mouth and every word that comes out of your writing. That's where your wisdom lives. So for you to know that even if it's coming out as comedy, even if it's coming out as a poem with like crystallized little metaphoric magical units, it's your wisdom and nobody else has it but you. So I'm going to take a 5-minute piece of time right now to give you an assignment, which we'll all do together. And it's going to involve, you're going to need a piece of paper and a pen. So be sure you get that. I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so I have all my accoutrements, my hanky, my Luden's cough drops, my water. I'm a sickling here. Okay, so on your piece of paper, make a spiral that looks like this. Just use your free hand and make a spiral. I'm going to try and play some music. See if I can get this to work. And then when you get your spiral done, I'll give you your next assignment, which is start in the very center there. And let yourself have the memories that your body owns right now. Your body owns whatever memories in its cells. It has memories of the big events that happened to you. Your body doesn't say things necessarily like good and bad. So side by side will be things that you probably once called traumatic, terrible, worst thing that ever happened to your wedding day or your first sexual experience. They're all jumbled up, but you're going to spiral out, beginning with your first memory. And you won't get this done because I'm only giving you 5 minutes. And Marge, you can use your phone for the timer. In those 5 minutes, you're going to say, put down just little markers, not whole sentences, but on mine I've got Mom's Home Bureau, Johnny Smith, praying to be a boy, moved to Syracuse, 6th grade, decided to be a nun. So you just go around chronologically and write down what memories pop up. We're not evaluating here. These are in the winner seats. So even if it's your trauma, just write it down. Got divorced, got raped, sexually harassed. If it's a big item, sometimes I've been raped, it never shows up on my circle because it wasn't a big item. But for some of us, that's a big deal. So just go around, be as honest as you can be, put down the things as they surface to you. I'm going to really try and get some music here because it's so helpful if music washes over us. And just start now and we'll let you know when 5 minutes is up. There we go. Okay, that was a quick 5 minutes. Okay, so the whole point of this is to, oh, my light just went off. The whole point of this is to give us the opportunity to see what we know based on what's happened to us. There's a whole piece of writing from Lillian Smith that talks about mastering our ordeals. And to have mastered an ordeal means that you've come to the place where you see that it happened as much for you as to you. That's big creative work, to arrive at that conclusion that something that feels very traumatic happened for you. But it's really a necessary requirement, I think, particularly for anyone. I don't know exactly how it is for fiction writers, but I know it's necessary requirement for the rest of us to be able to harvest our wisdom and to know I don't know anything if it's not stored in my cells. And that's why I can't know what you know, because I'm not in your cells and my shit didn't happen to you. And so, you know, there's an NPR, National Public Radio, has started in the 40s, I think, an NPR show called This I Believe. And somebody told me about it once, and I said, oh, that's great, because I have all my beliefs written down. I have the Artist Creed, I have the Real Woman Creed, I have an Apostles Creed. I'm just going to send them off, because if they want to know what I believe, here it is in a nutshell. And I just quickly looked up the address to NPR and sent them off and expected great applause and success, none of which came, of course, because I failed to go to their writer's submission page where they say explicitly, we don't care so much what you believe, we want to know how come you believe it. What's the story of why you believe this thing? That's what they want, the story. It's radio. They want the story. of why you believe something. So that's when I realized, oh my God, I better go through and see the major things that have happened to me that come to my mind when I put myself in a meditative state and spiral around and just think of what's happened to my life since my first memory. Because that's where my wisdom will be. You know, what you believe is what you know to be true from your own lived experience. It has nothing to do with what we are taught from our churches. That most of that's out, throw the baby out with the bathwater there. But when it comes to your own personal wisdom and your own knowing of things, you know it because you lived through something. Kabir, the poet, says, if you haven't lived through it, it's not true. So doing this, even though you didn't get a chance to finish it, if you take any of these one items on your list, there's a story there. And the story will have a narrative arc. It has a beginning and an end. And it has an upset, because there's no story without an upset. I heard Joyce Carol Oates talk on stage last year. She's this frail little, like in her 80s, this frail little teeny tiny woman who's written these incredibly muscular novels all her life. And she says, two kind people on a stage does not a play make. Because plays are about conflict. Writing stories are about conflict. That's why those of us who have suffered the most know the most, if we're able to harvest. And that harvest process involves some techniques and strategies. So for you to be able to identify, you look on your chart and you have to really mind for where was the turbulence, because that's where the story is, where the hero, you started out wanting something, it got aborted, the mission was not accomplished because you met with the demons in the forest, there was a battle, you lost a few, you won a few, and there's the resolution. You know, there's a conflict up here, but the narrative arc ends in the resolution. And part of that final denouement is, so now I know this. Used to be in some of our children's books, the moral of the story is this. So it's kind of the equivalent of that. So now I know this. And I'll just tell you briefly in a nutshell, one of mine was always the biggest trauma of my life was, you know, I decided at age 12 to be a nun because in 6th grade, a nun kept me from committing suicide because she did this positive reinforcement campaign on me that worked. So I'm alive because of a nun. I think those nuns have magic wands under those long folds of black serge material. So I say I'm going to be one when I grow up. I had 6 years from age 12 to 18 when I actually entered the convent. And it was a combination of bliss and turbulence. I can't pretend it wasn't, because here I am, a young lesbian in a convent. That's, you know, it's a made-for-TV movie. So anyway, I get kicked out 2 years later. Biggest trauma of my life, because I never had a plan B. So for 30 years, it's a trauma. No matter how much therapy I do, no matter how much drinking, no matter how much drugs, no matter how much sex, I could not run away from the problem, the trauma. They done me wrong. I was like a living country western tune. So anyway, my last ditch effort to heal myself was to go and to see if I could enlist someone to hear the story who was there when it happened. And my novice director had died, but there was a woman who was the provincial director, the boss of the whole mother house, was still alive. And I asked her, would she please let me just tell her the story? Maybe if I had a witness, it could get me healed somehow. So she agreed. I met her in a convent, told her, don't interrupt, let me tell the whole story. I'll cry through the whole thing and that'll be fine, but just let me finish. So I told her the whole story, started at age 12, blah, 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 the whole story. And at the end, she asked me if I would forgive her for the terrible injustice that was done to me on her watch. And, you know, I wasn't there for that. So it was kind of like, well, sure, you know, I'll forgive you for this terrible injustice done on your watch. And then she says, would you forgive the entire community of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet for this terrible injustice that was done to you by us? I said, sure, I'm happy to forgive the entire community of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. And when that happened, it was as if all the radiance of the heavens entered into me and washed away the darkness. And suddenly, all that pain dissipated and a whole new consciousness rose up that said, how lucky was I that they gave me the privilege of spending 2 years in a monastic environment so I could get my roots in spiritual mysticism and ground myself in meditation and contemplation. So that whole thing got turned around, upside down, and now I'm like, oh my God, it only felt like a trauma for 30 years, but now I see what a blessing it was that it happened for me so I could be the prophetic voice I'm meant to be in the world, and that I would have the wherewithal to become a mystic should I choose to dedicate myself to that. And then driving home, one more thing occurred, which was the biggest one of all, that I could see clearly how I created getting myself kicked out. Every disobedience, every single thing I did, stealing wine, stealing cigarettes, smoking in the woods, sleeping with Sister Rita, every single thing I did in the service of getting myself kicked out when my time was up there. So that took 30 years. So I'm not saying this is an easy ride. I'm just saying when we get it, that all of these turbulences that are on our chart here are opportunities for us, blessings for us, that you know you've mastered the ordeal when you can say thank you at the end of it. And everybody has curse to blessing stories. You know, I do storytelling workshops, and we start out where people do their curse to blessing story. It's usually about a divorce, but sometimes it's about other things. And it was like the worst thing that ever happened to me, I thought, became now the greatest thing. I divorced the bastard, or whatever, however it went. So freedom came from the painful experience. So I'm just saying that the stuff of our life is the very grist for our creative mills as writers. And how you turn your personal experience into your poems, into your stories, is the creative work. But you never have to look anywhere else. It's never about fancy words, never about thesaurus. It's always about, did you get the story straight? Did you start at the right? My story has to start at age 12. And it can't end till 30 years later, because that's how long it took me to heal from that. Most stories are much shorter than that. So that's what you get to do. You get to harvest those events of your life and come to a point where you yourself have gratitude for what once made your knees buckle. So I think that's all I'm going to say on the yin part of our life, because we have to get into the yang part, which is, all right, what are you going to make of it? You know, somebody once said to me, you only have to ask yourself 3 questions. What? So what? And now what? And that was like, oh, really? It kind of makes sense, because if you know that about who you are as a writer, what are you writing? So what about it? And now what? Because I just started a spiritual memoir. I've been going to, I go to Maureen Murdoch's memoir classes. I'm learning memoir from all the guild masters of memoir. And I'm a diligent student because it's a new genre for me. And I'm including poems in it. It's kind of avant-garde. I'm including snippets of letters and images. So I'm making it up kind of in a evolutionary or revolutionary way. But it's still a spiritual memoir. So it's the story of how does a young, brainwashed Catholic lesbian end up being a prophetic mystic in the world? How does that happen? What does that trajectory look like? So no matter what your work is as a writer, you have to know the trajectory. You have to get clear about the narrative arc. And every chapter wants to have a conflict. It's not the whole book. It's like every chapter needs that narrative arc in it. It's like I took a cinematography screenwriting course once, and the teacher says, every scene has a conflict in it. I'm saying, it does not. I couldn't believe it, because the movie seems peaceful except for the big conflict. He goes, no, every scene has to have a conflict. And I fought with him over it until he finally won. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a conflict with someone else. It could be a conflict with you and your culture, a conflict with you and your religion, you and your child, you and yourself. I can't be queer. They're perverted and immoral. I had that conflict with myself for many years because I was a good little Catholic girl. But in every scene, in every chapter, there has to be that vivid narrative arc that shows what is being dealt with here, that says it begins here, the mess is here, and the resolution is there. Once you know what that narrative arc is, and you got yourself some powerful writing, and you just tell one story after another, and you can make a case for why it should be in the world, why it should be published, because we're hungry for stories, because the myths we grew up with have failed us. Our own cosmological myths are out of date, right? Since we learn about the Big Bang, we have a new myth. We're evolving at warp speed. We could see our own quantum changes in the course of 1 or 2 years in our life. So these are quantum leap times. So your stories are a really critical part to the making of a new contemporary cosmology. That's simply the deal. And so that's why we're making a case for women's voices from every country, every county, every community, every family. How do we tell the stories that we're engaged in after we've mastered them? That's what we're looking for. So I'll tell you, I'll just give you an example of how does it work as a writer thinks about getting her work published. Of course, it always comes up for me, should I find a publisher or should I publish it myself? Because the truth is, I have made much more money off the books I've published myself, because I have a massive platform and I make my living as a workshop director. So in the course of a year, I probably have contact with, 10,000 people. I have 9,000 people on my mailing list, and they happily hear from me once a month, if not more often. I'm a Huffington Post blogger. That's called your platform. So no publisher will take you seriously if you don't have a platform. And that just simply means audience. Who's your audience? How do you know where they are? And how do you communicate with them? So you have to be working on that right now simultaneously with all the writing that you're doing that you hope to become famous for one day. Will never make it anywhere if you don't get your platform growing and going. So, you know, for me, I'm invited constantly to be part of webinars, and the invitation always says, must have mailing list of 5,000 plus people, because everyone's trying to merge mailing lists, right? It's a new phenomenon in the world. But as part of your book proposal, if you're not writing fiction, because your book proposal for fiction is send in the fiction, but the book proposal for anything for memoir and for nonfiction is there's a space there that says overview of the work, and then you go right into marketing plan, platform, author's bio. So the platform is, in the marketing strategy, is the foremost thing that they look at. Practically some of them even before they look at the overview of what you're pitching to them. Because if they don't think you can sell more books than they can, they're not interested in having you come on board. So number one priority is make a plan for yourself. Even if you start being a guest blogger, you know, there's women blogging on everything under the sun. Doesn't even have to be a female blogger. Could be a blogger blogging on your subject, the thing you're an expert in, know what you're an expert in. And then approach those bloggers and say, I'd like to be a guest blogger. Always, always have your byline, have your website, start accumulating email addresses. You have to do this. You know, I have a Twitter account. Every once in a while when I have a, you know, consolidated great idea, I tweet it. But I'm not really an active tweeter, nor do I look at a lot of tweets, but I'm getting ready to sign up for tweets by some of these agents because I've decided for this memoir, I'm not going to self-publish it. I'm going to get a mainstream publisher, and I'm going to do it through an agent. So I have to get an agent. Now, how am I going to get an agent? Here's my strategy. I look at the 3 top people who write like me. I see who are their agents, and I go after them. And now you only go after one at a time because you can't mass broadcast to get an agent. So this week I wrote a proposal, an email pitch to the agent of Annie Dillard. Next is going to the agent of Terry Tempest Williams. And the next one will go to the agent of Anne Lamott. Because I know if these people like those people's work, they'll like my work. Because my work is similar. It's I don't know if confessional is the word, but it's kind of essay-like, story-driven, humor, pithy, you know, profound, some wisdom mixed in there. It's a beautiful, well, if you've read Annie Dillard or Terry Tempest Williams or Anne Lamott, you know what I'm talking about. You should read those women. So anyway, that's my strategy. And now I've just read Poets and Writers. I subscribe to Poets and Writers. You should too. And I've just nailed down the names of the next 20 agents I'm going to go for one at a time, because each one needs a couple weeks. If they say I need 2 to 4 weeks, you don't send off, because you don't want to hear from 2 agents, we like your work on the same day. So it's a laborious process. And that's just a matter of you get your book proposal ready by reading how to do it. You know, online it's really easy to find what the elements are. It's called the overview of your project, your personal bio, you know, where have you published before, how many, you know, what your audience, what your platform looks like. That's a really critical part, and what your marketing strategy is. So you have to be believable in that regard. So part of taking yourself seriously as a writer, yin part, get yourself a spiritual practice. That's not time for thinking. That's time for non-thinking. That's non-linear world. And that will fuel your next steps, which are the yang part. And you have to discern what's your next step. How ready are you? You need to have, for a book proposal, the introduction, annotated table of contents, 3 or 4 chapters they want to see. So you have to know. I don't even write my introductions until my book is practically done, because you think it's going to be one thing, and then as you write, you change. We evolve and grow as we write. Just like I can't get past my 20s in this memoir because I keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. Every time I read the chapter, I go, oh my God, I didn't talk enough about that. So deeper, deeper, deeper. I'm not getting into my 30s yet. So this memoir is going to take a while. But those are the steps. Your left brain work is the book proposal. You decide, if you have a platform, you can self-publish and you can make money. But if you don't have a platform, if you don't have an audience, who you send out a mass email and say, the book's out, click here, go get it on Amazon. If you don't have 1,000 people to let know who will be excited about your new book, you shouldn't be self-publishing. Who are you going to sell it to? What's the plan? How many thousands of people have a book on CreateSpace that no one has ever heard of? Because they don't know who to let know. So that's why we need the International Writing Guild. It's why you need your community of women writers. It's why you need to grow your lists in every way right now, in every way that you can. And plus this, I'll tell you a new thing that's happening. Women are coming to me with ideas and want me to be there. Would you please look at my first 50 pages? I'm going like, this is so inappropriate for you to ask me this. I'm not somebody's editor. But I said, I know somebody who can do a professional evaluation, like an editorial assessment of your first, say, 20 pages or something. It'll cost you $75, but it's your investment to make, where a person with an editorial mind will look at your first bunch of pages and say, okay, you've got it, just do whatever the editorial people say, but that's not me. But you know who it is, and she's on this call right now, and it's Marge Hahn. So I'm just going to say, Marge will let you know if you're at that point where you've written something, but you're unsure, should I go in this direction? Do I need to do this? Is it too confessional? Does it have a strong narrative arc? Then Marge Hahn can do that first service for you. I mean, she's also a professional editor, but she's great at having like a developmental editor's mind. She's able to see, you describe what your hope is, you send her sample pages, and then she says it lines up or it doesn't. So you can do that, future. She'll make it known to you how to, use her for that service, how to pay her if she's going to be the person. But you have to create a writer's circle for yourself. Be part of this guild. Find out what we used to have zip code parties where you could get all the people in your zip code, and then you're part of a free writer's circle. I have writer circles, but they pay for it because they're sitting with, a master teacher. But to just have your own writing circles where you and 4 or 5 other women who are writing listen to each other. You hear yourself speak your words. Something happens in the course of that. And so we have to take some initiative in that regard to, create our circles of consequence and our circles of support. Because we can't be writing in a vacuum. It just doesn't work for most of us. Marge, let's see if there's any questions here, because it's getting a little pithy.
Yeah, so Jan, because we have, 15 minutes left, I'm going to try to organize the questions and also choose them in an order where I determine that the answer will benefit the most people in case we don't get to all of them, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think this would be a very helpful one, Jan, from Robin Plant. She journals every morning and still wants to make time to write on a creative project beyond the journal. Advice on, sounds like, golly, there's not enough time to do both.
Say that she wants the writing to be on what?
She journals every morning and still wants to make time to write on a creative project beyond the journal. And so it sounds like she doesn't feel she has time to do the journaling, which I suppose is the yin, and do the project, which is, yin, but there's a little more yang in that, isn't there? Because it's a very directed, focused.
Well, you got to know why you're doing what you do. I'll tell you what, every single book I ever wrote, I told you my first book was me trying to figure out what happened to me on that year-long journey. My second book, Marry Your Muse, was written because I discovered women were silenced. So it's telling them how to get unsilenced. My third book or fourth book, Divining the Body, is because I realized I was disembodied and I had a fatal car accident, near fatal car accident, and I had to figure out how to get in my body. So this is about how women get in their body. This is a book of poetry called There Are Burning Bushes Everywhere, because I was freaking out and needed to work on something beautiful. So I put together poems and photographs, and it was a beautiful project and it healed me. This is a book called Creativity Unzipped, because people are thinking they're not creative because they can't draw a straight line. Where we're creating every day of our lives, we're the creator of. So everything I do is a big fat problem that I'm solving. So I always tell people, if you don't know what you're writing, figure out something that you have a reason for writing it. Figure out what's breaking your heart. Ask yourself, because if your heart's desire is to write, the only other pole that you need to attach to is what's breaking your heart, and that will give you some clue about what to write. It's like Born Gay. Born Gay, because kids are killing themselves, right? It's a problem, and world problems they don't belong to the world, they belong to us. So you say, what's that thing that breaks your heart? It could be whales. It could be women being sexually harassed. It could be millennials not voting. I don't know what it is, but what is the problem that your writing can address and bring to light and maybe help solve? Then you will have a why. Then there will be some urgency about getting to your work. I'm so excited about my memoir because there's not too many stories about how does somebody who starts out so marginalized and so categorized and looked down upon come to the place that I've come to. That's a miracle. And it happens step by grueling step. But when we read the stories of other women, our lives have been changed. Like, Marge, what's one book that changed your life?
Care of the Soul by Thomas More.
Care of the Soul by Thomas More. Every single woman on this call would be able to say, this is the one book that really helped me, that turned me around, that opened up my life. So imagine your book is going to do that for somebody else. My books help people. You want your books to do that for other people. But you got to have some urgency. You don't just say, I'm going to write a book. It's like, what the heck is it about? Why are you writing it? Who's going to be helped by it? Because that's got to be, you're making a case for this in your marketing strategy. Your marketing strategy involves statistics. I'm now writing numbers for my book proposal about how many people are in this Exodus community who have left the church, which led me to write this book. finding your on-ramp to your own spiritual path, because people are leaving churches in droves. And then they think they can't have a spiritual life. So the question for you is, what's the problem? Any other questions?
Yeah, and Jan, I'll summarize what you just said. That if I first what it is I must write about, that will actually dictate my journal entries. And my journal entries become the content and the experimenting and practicing toward the actual writing. To me, it's the same writing. Is that fair to say?
Well, except for I think our journal entries get us clear on how the problem influences us personally. Where in our inner lives are we touched by the thing we're called to write about? And then in our poetry or in our memoir or nonfiction or even fiction, we decide how we're going to take it on. After my memoir, I'm going to write a novel. It's called Miss Audrey's High Velocity School of Bliss. And it's going to be my fictional chance to say what I learned from very wise women when I was a kid. And it's going to be a movie one day. And I'll be at the Academy Awards because it will be nominated, right? So whether it's fiction doesn't matter. You can deliver the goods in fiction. Fiction solves problems. Doris Lessing's novel, Shikasta, solved a big problem for me because I thought it didn't matter what I did until I read her novel, and then I realized I'm an emissary. I'm here reporting on what's going on so people can think about it through my point of view, and that's important. So I needed Doris Lessing's novel to reach that conclusion. So I don't know, what do you want your novel to be about? Usually they're pretty personal, I think. And memoirs, of course, is always personal. But I'm just saying, it's hard to stay at the workbench if we're not riveted there for a purpose. It feels frivolous. And I took a writing class once when I was in my 20s, and I didn't get it because I thought it was about using funny words or big words, or I thought it was about the words. And after I made my trip around the world, my uncle said, I want you to meet a big journalist. He's a big journalist here in San Francisco. He writes for the Chronicle, and because you should publish your book. So I said, oh yeah, I made my trip around the world. I should definitely publish a book. So I meet with the journalist in this fancy men's club. He's got this cigar. So what's the story, lady? What happened? I said to him, I went around the world for a year. He goes, that's no story. What happened? I didn't have a story for him because I thought the fact that I had done something was a sell, but there's nothing there. Same as when I rode my motorcycle across the country. There's no motorcycle magazine that wants that story. They want to know what happened. What are the juicy details? What's the narrative arc? What happened when you ran into the hurricane? Right? You need to know the story that holds the conflict, and that will reveal itself. But whatever your writing milieu is, I think that's what comes out of our personal journaling. That journaling usually follows my spiritual practice time when I'm already open and receptive. So the ideas say, do this. Ooh, try that. Ooh, that's fun.
Jan, a question from Teresa Levitch. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Teresa. How do you handle your writing when you travel? How do you get to the workbench when you travel?
I don't write when I travel. I collect stories. I collect events that will cause me to know something I wouldn't have known if I didn't travel. I'm so happy in an airplane. I get ideas there. Sometimes I write songs in an airplane. I get ideas and I write them down in an airplane, but I don't try and write the words in an airplane.
Wonderful. From Holly Rose, Jan.
Hey, Holly.
Yeah, she's got a nice little remark here for you to read if you go to the Q&A. But her question is how to approach the yang and carry all the clarity, wisdom, and specialness of working with our deepest self into that process.
It happens by default. And the more time you dedicate to your spiritual practice, the more grounded you are, because you're learning to transcend duality. And it doesn't, you know, they say the sign of a true genius is the ability to hold two contradictory thoughts at the same time in your mind. So deepening your spiritual practice means you expand your ability to think in non-dual ways. It's just the byproduct of spiritual practice, because in illuminating powers start to take root. So the beginnings of enlightenment actually start dawning inside the being. And so that ability to remain grounded and to not be upset causes one to approach the writing of the book proposal with a consistent authenticity of, I got something that's really good for the world here. I love writing book proposals because I'm always announcing, I got something really good for the world here. Marketing myself is fun because I got something to give. It's no baloney. It's the real deal. And so that's the connection between the yin and the yang in our lives as writers, is that the deeper you go in your spiritual practice, the more committed you are to that time of silence and reception where you're a satellite dish to supreme intelligence, the more that takes root. It's like a taproot. So it affects us interiorly, so that all the work that stems from who and what we are as creators, you know, your writing is your creativity in action. So all that creative work, I think, gets a leg up. It becomes more, it finds where it's wanting to attach in the world. It finds it's so clear. It finds its counterpart in the world. We're just so clear-minded, I think, when we are true to our practice.
Jan, it's 5 minutes until closing. I'm going to request the main question because I do think that we addressed that. I think Jan addressed one of these remaining questions, and I think another question is a really good personal question about your story. I'm going to invite Jan folks to email you at jan@janphillips.com if they want to check in with you about those questions. Hope that's okay, folks. jan@janphillips.com.
I'm not saying I can respond to hundreds of people's questions. I am saying this, though. Get on my newsletter list. Go to janphillips.com and get my monthly newsletter. And to start your own platform, start it with forwarding mine. You can bounce off of mine. If you don't have a newsletter of your own, use mine and let that be the beginning of you accumulating a list. And besides that, we're going to, in January 21st, we're going to start a 4-week seminar. So you have 4 sessions of 90 minutes each where we'll have time to go into this. There will be videos and music and homework. And I will have examples of different book proposals and much more time. This is like skimming over the surface. But with those 4 sessions, we'll have plenty of time to have personal interaction. Take your own case and work with your case. You come forward with it. You make a pitch to me. I say this and that. So the learning will be much more visceral and deep and broad and fabulous. So you probably have to pay something for that, but I know there's an early bird special. So you'll get that. Marge will let you know those details, or Kelly, I think, will come on later and say.
I can actually say that now, Jan, since we're there. And folks, I'll be sending out more information about that with the follow-up email that'll include the recording. Our early bird special, only for a week through Sunday, December 17th. Member early bird rate is $69. That means, I want to clarify for folks, that you've paid your $55 annual dues. It doesn't mean that you're engaging in our community via our Facebook page or even via our free webinars for members and non-members. The non-member early bird rate is $89. So we think,
and we got a lot of scholarships to give out too.
Yes. Yeah.
Wherever that's posted,
yeah,
you maybe qualify for a scholarship if you don't have the money. But I'm telling you, this $55 investment, or what it is an investment in your future as a writer. You cannot afford not to be part of the Writing Guild, because it's a vast global community of support that will sustain you when you're breaking down, that will lift you up when your wings are folding and your legs are buckling. We will hold you up. So do not think you can't afford this. You can't afford not to be part of this circle. That's why we have 1,000 Voices, campaign, because my agenda is to raise the decibel level of our voices. No matter where you live, I'm interested in you getting published, and I'm supporting that, and I'm going to speak to that, and you're going to get no shortage of master teachers through your connection with this organization. So you found us. You found us. Make it your home. Make an investment in yourself. This is the first day of something brand new.
Excellent, Jan. I'm just going to give more of that data. It's navigating the path to publication. We'll put it in the chat room too. 4 consecutive Sundays, January 21, 28, and February 4 and 11. Same time. If you're on the East Coast, it'll be 8 to 9:30. Pacific Coast, 4 to 5:30, same time as this event, and there'll be recordings as well. So, Kelly, I'm gonna invite you to come on board. Folks, I've gotta leave this webinar to go to the All Voices Open Mic webinar. In an ideal world, I would have set them up into the same, room, but I didn't plan that well. So I'm gonna say goodbye.
Can you see and hear me, Marge?
Yes. Yes.
I can't see myself for some reason, so I just want to make sure I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, you're there, Kelly. Hey, I have another appointment, so I can't be part of the open mic, but I'm just saying congratulations to everybody who's speaking on there, because it's stepping out and finding your voice and using your voice. So I'm proud of everyone who's reading tonight, and I hope you have a great time. Thanks for listening on this webinar. Thank you, Kelly, for all you do for the Guild. And Marge, thanks for facilitating this.
Thank you, Jan. Listen, before you go anywhere, everybody who's still here, if you would just give me a minute, I want to give you some details about some upcoming events that we have, and to urge you to go to IWWG.org/events, because there is a wonderful list of all of our free and other events, both live and online in our digital village. And we have a number of them. And the next free event we really want to urge you to come to on January 11th. That's going to be free online. I believe it is is that a Tuesday night? Or, sorry, let me just double check that.
Thursday.
January 11th. That's when Dixie's event, right, Marge?
Yeah, it's our member book spotlight is going to be one of our monthly features, free to members and non-members, and Dixie will be interviewing Patricia Bell Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say Patricia Bell Scott has written this fabulous memoir. It's kind of almost like a biography of Pauli Murray and her relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt, civil rights activist you may or may not heard of. that had a really powerful relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt. It's a beautiful, award-winning book. Dixie's going to interview Patricia Bell Scott, who is a member of IWWG, and they're going to talk about her writing that book and about Polly Murray and Eleanor Roosevelt. And Patricia is a really fascinating, wonderful woman. So we hope you will attend that event for free. Register, because just like you did for this, register in Zoom so that you can attend, again, at no charge. Now, I do also want to remind you that January 15th is our deadline for applying for a 1-year IWWG scholarship. And the details about applying for that are on our Facebook public page. And I will make sure you should go there to find those out, because I don't think they're yet posted on our website. But we'll get those posted on our website, because I know many of you are going to want to know about how to apply for a scholarship to a 1-year membership, and that deadline is January 15th. So we have Jan's webinar, Early Bird Rate. To register, $69 for members, $89 for non-members, and you can join IWWG, $55 for a year. If you join, you're going to have a discount to all of our Digital Village events that we charge for. You're going to have a discount to our regional events, and you're going to have a discount to our annual summer conference, which can be significant. I do want to mention the California Dreaming IWWG conference, which is going to be a 1-day conference. It is in the LA area. It's the 3rd or 4th annual one, and it's a full day in person with some of our really most dynamic and prominent IWWG faculty. The date on that, Marge, is, all right,
January 27th is Saturday. Folks, the only time I have all power is when I'm the host of these webinars. I need to stop the recording so that I can go to the open mic room.
Okay, so I'm just going to, we're going to let you go, Marge. I'm just going to, we'll end the call now, because I want you to go to the All Voices open mic. That is next. And I just want to urge you, go to our IWWG.org/events, and you can see everything we've got upcoming, and we definitely want to see you at our upcoming events. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And Jan,
Yes.
I mean, this is just like, you're a dynamo. I mean, I just can't believe how much information you've given us in this really short call. And I think anybody who wants to work with you, this is a one-of-a-kind opportunity coming up to work with you in January and February, and I hope people do.
Good, me too. See you all in January. Love you.
Bye,
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.